Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to stand on the edge of your own life, looking back at every secret, every choice, every regret? I never really thought about it until it happened to me. My name is Avery. I'm 41 years old, and I live in Chicago with my husband and our 2 wonderful kids. On the surface, you'd probably say my life looks pretty good. I'm a school teacher, I have a supportive partner, and we go to church every Sunday. I used to think I knew what faith was all about. I really did. But I had no idea how quickly everything could change in one single moment. One night, after a long, exhausting day at work, I went to bed feeling more tired than usual. I remember tugging the covers up to my chin and thinking about everything I had to do the next day. Lesson plans, grading papers, making sure my kids were prepared for their spelling tests, all the usual stuff. But as my eyes closed, this eerie sensation washed over me. It was like a pull, a force dragging me into darkness. I couldn't fight it. No matter how much I tried to cling to my body, to the comfort of my bed, I felt myself slipping away. Everything went dark, completely black. It wasn't like any dream I've ever had, or even the feeling of a deep sleep. I couldn't hear anything. I couldn't move. Then, as fast as it all went dark, it was like my eyes opened onto a whole new reality. Only, I wasn't in my bedroom anymore. I didn't feel the ache in my neck from sleeping wrong, or the slight pinch in my back from tossing and turning. Instead, I felt weightless. And then I saw him, Jesus. I know it sounds unbelievable. Believe me, I questioned it myself, even while it was happening. But there he was, so powerful and yet so calm. There was a light around him, brighter than anything I'd ever seen, and still it didn't hurt my eyes to look at him. If you've ever prayed and felt a hint of warmth in your heart, imagine that multiplied by 1,000. That's what it felt like, just standing in his presence. I felt this intense peace, and yet, at the same time, I was trembling inside. It was like being known so completely that you can't hide a single thought. He looked at me, straight at me, and I had this overwhelming sense that he saw every single piece of me, the good, the bad, and especially the parts I tried to keep hidden from everyone else. My entire life started flashing through my mind, almost like someone flipping the pages of a picture book at lightning speed. I saw my childhood, my teenage years, my friendships, my mistakes, my heartbreaks, my triumphs, and then, just as quickly, it stopped on one particular sin. It was something I'd never considered a big deal, something I had always chalked up to personal preference or a private matter I didn't need to talk about with anyone. I'm talking about masturbation. Now, before you click away or feel awkward, I need you to understand how stunned I was. I had never thought of it as something that would be a big deal to God. It wasn't hurting anyone, right? It was just something I did in private, something that felt almost like an afterthought in the grand scheme of things. But as Jesus revealed the truth to me in that moment, it felt like I was seeing it for the very first time. Every choice, every habit, every secret I clung to was laid out in front of me, and he showed me how it was a doorway, an opening that allowed the enemy to sneak into my life. I watched scenes of my life as if they were projected on a screen. Each time I gave in to that temptation, I was giving the enemy legal ground to accuse me. I saw how it weakened my spiritual life, how it shaped my thoughts and distorted my view of intimacy, how it subtly drew me away from genuine connection with my husband and even my children, all because it was rooted in secrecy and shame. It was like each time I indulged, I was willingly handing over a piece of my freedom, a piece of my clarity, to something that couldn't truly satisfy me. And then came the most terrifying part. I saw an image, something like a courtroom, and there stood this dark, shadowy figure, pointing at me, accusing me, saying, "Look at her. She says she loves God, but look at what she's doing. She's chosen this act over holiness. She's created an idol out of her desire." It was like the enemy had a file on me, ready to present evidence of my guilt. I felt so small in that moment, so ashamed, because there was no denying the truth of what I'd done. But then Jesus looked at me, and even though his eyes shone with righteousness, they were also filled with unimaginable love. He didn't yell, he didn't scold. Instead, he said softly, "You don't have to live like this anymore." And the wave of relief that washed over me felt like finally breathing after being underwater for too long. I realized that, yes, I was guilty, but that wasn't the end of my story. There was hope, and there was a chance to break free from the chains I had unknowingly put on myself. I can't stress enough how pivotal that moment was for me. Up until then, I thought I had a pretty good handle on my faith. I prayed regularly, read my Bible, went to church. Yet I had compartmentalized my life, keeping certain things in the shadows. In that instant, I saw that there's no such thing as a harmless, hidden sin. It either draws me closer to the light or further into darkness. And I understood, in a way I never had before, that the spiritual realm is very real. There is a real enemy, and he exploits every weakness, every loophole, every crack we leave unguarded. Standing there, I felt overwhelmed by shame, but I also felt the overwhelming presence of love, love that was deeper than my sins, more enduring than my failures, and far more powerful than my shame. Jesus stepped closer to me, and even though I wanted to look away, he gently lifted my chin so I would meet his gaze. I can't recall his exact words, but the message was crystal clear. "I love you. I want you free. Will you let me help you?" His words echoed in my heart. I wanted that freedom so badly, but I also knew it would mean letting go of something that had become like a security blanket. I never told anyone about my struggles. It was too embarrassing, too personal. But I saw so clearly how that secrecy was part of what kept me enslaved. I realized that I needed to bring it to the light, to acknowledge it for what it really was. It wasn't just a harmless habit. It was a chain that needed to be broken. Suddenly, it was like the scene shifted, and I was back in my bed. My chest was heaving like I'd run a marathon. My body was drenched in sweat, and my heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. I sat up, gasping for air, trying to make sense of what had just happened. It wasn't a dream. I knew that with every fiber of my being. This was real, and it had changed me. The next morning, I felt different. I walked around my home and looked at my husband, my children, my entire life, and it was like seeing everything through new eyes. I felt an urgent need to talk to God, to truly confess and ask for help. So I locked myself in our tiny guest room, got down on my knees, and poured out my heart. I confessed every hidden thought, every moment of giving in to that temptation. And as I prayed, tears streamed down my face, tears of relief, tears of sorrow for how blind I'd been, tears of gratitude for the mercy I'd been shown. In that quiet moment, I felt a peace I hadn't known before. I felt like God was saying, "This is the beginning of a new chapter. Let me lead you." My journey since that day hasn't been perfect. I wish I could tell you that I never struggled again. But freedom is a process. Every time I'm tempted to slip back into that old habit, I remember standing before Jesus and seeing the truth. that I'm not condemned, that I'm loved, and that I have the power to say no because I'm not alone in this fight. I also realized how important accountability is. I confided in a close friend from church, someone I trusted. I told her everything. It wasn't easy. My voice shook, and I felt a wave of shame wash over me as I spoke. But she looked at me with compassion in her eyes and reminded me I wasn't the only one who'd ever dealt with this. She prayed with me, encouraged me, and helped me find resources and support so I wouldn't have to face this alone. It felt like a weight had been lifted. Finally, the secret was out in the open, and I couldn't hide it away and pretend it didn't matter. That's why I'm sharing this story now. It's hard to talk about, and I know it can make people uncomfortable, but I truly believe there's someone out there who needs to hear this. Someone who feels trapped, ashamed, maybe even convinced that their private sins don't matter. I'm here to tell you they do matter, but not because you're condemned and beyond hope. They matter because they're keeping you from experiencing the fullness of the life God has for you. They matter because ignoring them gives the enemy a foothold, a crack to wiggle through and whisper lies into your soul. I'm living proof that it doesn't have to stay that way. The feeling of freedom, of no longer being chained by shame, is like stepping into fresh air after being in a stuffy room for too long. It's the relief of knowing you're not defined by your worst mistakes, that you're not stuck repeating the same cycle forever. Yes, it takes honesty, and yes, it takes surrender. But the peace that comes from that surrender is worth everything. If you're struggling right now with something you've never told anyone, maybe it's this exact issue, or maybe it's something else entirely, please know that you're not alone. There's a reason you're hearing this story. Don't keep putting it off, thinking you'll deal with it later. Life is fragile. We aren't guaranteed tomorrow. Let me tell you, standing there, caught between this life and the next, I realized how precious every moment is and how crucial it is to walk in the truth today. Not tomorrow, not someday when it's more convenient. Right now, I want to encourage you to take that step. Talk to God about it, even if it feels scary or weird at first. Find someone you can trust, maybe a pastor, a counselor, or a close friend, and share what you're going through. Ask for help, for prayer, for accountability. It's amazing how light you can feel once you stop trying to handle everything in secret. You might be surprised at how many people can relate to your struggle. Sometimes the hardest part is being honest about it.